All right, welcome to a special edition of the Ed Martinez Show. We don't have Madam X today, but we do have myself here and a special guest that I have with me here in the studio audience today, which is Jose Herrera, who's going to join us on, like I said, a special edition today. Today we're going to be talking a little more serious. Hopefully, if you saw the show last night, you had some fun with that. But it's going to be a little less intense, at least between us.
I think it
is. At least
is.
between us, it will.
I think it is.
And we're going to be talking more about the law today. So today we're going to be talking about a legal case. My good friend Jose Herrera is a lawyer as well, and he's got a case that you've actually consulted with me a little bit about. We've discussed it. Not that you need my help or anything, but it's always good to talk to somebody and get a second opinion.
I always talk to Ed a little bit because you're my objective opinion.
I'm the objective observer.
The objective opinion.
And also, having been a prosecutor, sometimes I can bring in a little insight as to how a prosecutor might think. Even though we're all individuals, you kind of get a little feel for how a prosecutor might think. So we've got a very interesting case today. Now, this is your case. This is your client.
Correct.
And I guess if you want, set it up a little bit on what exactly is happening with your case.
We kind of set it up in this fashion. 2 years ago, as many folks know, the legislature amended the Stand Your Ground law.
Right.
And changed the burden where once the defendant raises basically a prima facie case of self-defense, it's up to the prosecutor by the heightened burden of clear and convincing evidence to show that the defendant had no reason to use Stand Your Ground.
All right. So that everybody understands.
Yeah.
When Stand Your Ground first came out, it was the defendant's burden to prove that they had fear, that they were in fear, that it was reasonable, and that they acted reasonable and met force with force in order to, avail themselves of the Stand Your Ground. In 2017, I think, right?
More or less.
17 or 18, it was changed, for lack of a better term. And now it is the state who has to prove that the defendant does not have a right to stand your ground, and then the burden will shift. But it's on the state. The state first has to prove that you don't have a stand your ground motion, right?
That's absolutely correct. And just to give some contextual background politically, most state attorneys' offices in the state were against it because they didn't feel like they had to carry that burden. So there was a lot of lobbying and a lot of pushing when the legislature passed it. Mm-hmm. And it was the subject of many appeals to the Supreme Court, and the landmark case on that, on retroactivity, on whether it applied post the law passing or not, was a case called Love v. State.
And it was retroactive.
So
in other words, when the new law was passed, when now the burden is on the state to first prove that you don't have a right to stand your ground, that can go back even to any pending cases that were waiting.
Correct.
Okay.
So this case that we're talking about here was waiting on Love to come out. We did file a Stand Your Ground motion, and the case it's an interesting case. It talks a lot about police limited jurisdiction and special police departments like the school board police department, UN police department. Those are special police departments that have very, very limited jurisdiction, and they're spelled out by statute. And so this case arises out of two juveniles having what otherwise be a fist fight.
Okay.
For lack of a better term.
And when you say juveniles, more or less what ages are they?
14, more or less. They're teenagers. Neighbor dispute. I mean, this was very typical back when, and I'm not going to date you, Ed, but when you were growing up, right?
Yes.
And
we did get into a lot of fist fights.
It caught my ear as well. It wasn't a big deal. You had a couple of fist fights here and there, and
that's it. And everybody goes home afterwards.
Correct. Well, my client actually went out and tried to separate this fight and tried to, make sure it was just between kids, keep everybody apart. And one of the other party's grandfather, who happens to be a school board officer, who wasn't working at the time, he was in his private residence, arrived and basically went back to his car, pulled out his off-duty weapon, pushed it in my client's chest, and said, "Look what I have for you, look what I have for you." He was disarmed. My client did disarm him. There's no question about that. And once everything was more or less separated, his minor grandson went back to his house, retrieved his duty Glock that was issued by the Miami-Dade School Board, came back.
The nephew.
The grandson.
The grandson, right. Which is one of the kids that was actually in the fight.
One of the kids that was involved in a fight.
Okay.
He went back, retrieved his gun, came back, waved the gun around, and ripped off a round. Okay?
The 15-year-old.
The 15-year-old.
Whatever, 14, 15-year-old, whatever his name
now.
is.
But
so with his grandfather's duty firearm.
Correct. That was issued by the Miami-Dade County School Board.
Right.
The juvenile waves the gun around, shoots it, takes it. It shows that he actually has knowledge of using it because we have a video that shows the entire incident.
Now, does your video also show the beginning where you say that the grandfather put the gun into your client's chest?
No, we don't have that video right now.
Okay.
But the video that we do have is the firing of this shot from the duty gun into a crowd of kids. You have kids around. Not only one gun, but two guns are brought. His off-duty gun and his on-duty gun.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's do something a little different though. We're kind of doing it like law school here.
Yeah, we are.
And let's not do it like law school.
We are.
Because like in law school, we would get the fact pattern and then we have to tell you what all the charges could possibly be. All right. Let's tell them first, what did they charge your client with?
Well, that's the interesting thing. The state attorney has decided to charge the only guy that didn't bring a gun, a weapon, or anything to this,
right,
with battering on a Leo for disarming the old man.
And when you say Leo, that's law enforcement
officer. Mm-hmm. They
for disarming the off-duty officer who brought a gun to a fist fight where children were at.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
And then I now know why they charged the misdemeanor battery for purposes of trying to negotiate a plea. They wanted to try to, I guess, coerce a plea out of my client, so they charged them with a misdemeanor battery, and then a misdemeanor charge of contributing to the delinquency of a minor.
Right.
So
and that is based on what? Did they tell you?
Allegedly the delinquency on a minor arises out of, they say, the state says, that he was not stopping the fight soon enough. Yet there's sworn statements given to the state attorney's office. And ironically, one of the prosecutors that was in that meeting was the head of public corruption at the time. So this thing gets even saucier. He was trying to keep.
And the reason you're saying that, so everybody understands, there is no public corruption going on here unless an officer is involved in committing some kind of corruption. That would be public corruption. But your client is not a public official, right?
No, my client's not a public official, but the officer. I mean, the grandfather.
That's what I'm trying to point out.
Official.
There's no need, if your client is in fact the only one who committed a crime here, there'd be no need for a public corruptions prosecutor to be there.
Correct.
That's the point you're trying to make.
I agree.
Right.
I agree. And notwithstanding all this evidence, the state attorney has the video that we're not going to play the whole video here. We're going to play the sound.
And just so you know, we're also not going to show you the video because there's images of a couple of minors on the video. So we don't want to put that out there. We don't want to put any minors' images or names out there. So,
Correct.
But you're going to hear the audio of the video.
Correct. And so the state attorney's office has, obviously they've at least put this in open court, that they have overcharged this at least for purposes of extrapolating for purposes of extrapolating a plea.
But see, here's the thing. Here's a question I have for you. Did you mention to the state that this officer putting his firearm in a place where a minor could have access to it is child endangerment?
Well, I'll just put it this way.
Because you're supposed to lock up your firearms. You're supposed to make sure your firearms are safe and that minors don't have access to it.
I agree, and I promised you when we came on this show that I wouldn't name anybody.
Don't do it.
And I'm not.
Don't do it.
And I'm not. But I will just say this. It's gone pretty high. They know about it.
Right.
And yet I don't think the person that needs to know about it knows about this.
When
if
you
they
say
knew about this wouldn't get that far.
When you say the person that needs to know, are you talking about Kathy Fernandez-Ron? I agree with you.
I don't believe it's gone to Kathy, and I think in fairness to Kathy, I'll give her deference because she does do the right thing.
She normally does. Time. She really does. Obviously,
and I don't think she knows about this.
And let me tell you something, as having worked in the office, why I feel that Kathy wouldn't know about this. This is not a public corruption case, and not that she's going to know about all of them. She's got a lot of prosecutors in that office. I think we're up to like almost 300 now.
I think so.
Plus, she does a lot of stuff with lobbying and trying to get money for the employees, for not just the state attorneys, but the staff. And she has a lot of special interest programs with the human trafficking. She's got a lot on her plate, okay? This really, from what you're telling me and when you came to talk to me, this is a case that should not have left the pits. Like, this is a case that any prosecutor with even a couple of years of experience should be able to handle this. So this is not something that would have had to get to, Kathy's desk. So I don't think she knows, because I think if Kathy, and I don't want to speak out of turn, and I don't want to speak for her, but I think if she sees the video in its entirety, I think Kathy is going to see exactly what's happening here.
I think so too. I also think that there's a couple of other issues here that the state attorney knows about. And I'm saying, when I talk about the office,
you mean the PIP prosecutor,
the PIP folks from I'm not talking about Kathy.
The assistant. You're talking about the assistant state attorneys that work in her office, not her.
Correct.
Right.
And one of the things is it's ironic, when the firearm that was discharged, nobody seized it. Nobody seized any of the firearms that were discharged. Right.
And the reason that's important is because that's evidence.
That's evidence.
They need to take the discharge. They probably, correct me if I'm wrong, so that the audience understands, they should have done GSR on everybody, which is gunshot residue test, to be able to determine and have proof, evidence of who fired the firearms. But, of course, if the allegation is only that the off-duty officer fired it and his grandson fired it, they probably didn't do GSR, because they were not there to... The whole point of why you're here, let's be honest, okay? The whole reason why Jose is here is to show that these officers were not out there to investigate this case. These officers were out there simply to cover for one of their fellow officers. That's what they did here. They covered for a fellow officer. They were not out there trying to collect evidence.
There's actually statements given to the state attorney's office, which is why public corruption was in on that meeting, where there's one of the witnesses tells the state attorney that's investigating and looking into it, saying they shut off the recording. They didn't want to hear about the firearms. Nobody cared about the firearms.
And you have it, because somebody took it with their cell phone.
Yeah, we have the video. We have the audio clip. I mean,
question: the off-duty grandfather, the off-duty officer, what was he wearing when he came to the scene?
Nothing. And
well, he was wearing a T-shirt.
Well, no, I mean, when I say nothing, T-shirt and shorts, like anybody on, like your neighbor.
Right. He wasn't wearing a T-shirt that says police or law enforcement. Not even a shirt that says I support law enforcement. It's just a regular T-shirt.
Correct.
Shorts, and he's how old?
He's maybe pushing 60.
Right. So a 60-year-old man wearing T-shirts and shorts comes to the scene with a gun, claiming he's a cop, and everybody's supposed to just believe him.
I agree. Well, that's where the testimony's kind of skewed.
It's not right.
He never really tells anybody he's a cop. Number one. Number two, he can't tell anybody he's a cop, because school board. He's not even a cop. It's a school board security officer. They call him a school board security officer, and he's got no jurisdiction other than what a private citizen would have. And in fact, I'll take it one step further, and Ed can maybe translate this a little bit better for me. To the only time that an out of jurisdiction officer can take any official action is if there's a felony in progress. And I can tell you this: there was no felony in progress. And guess what? The only people that were guilty of a felony were the grandfather and the grandson.
Correct.
And yet the state attorney's office has chosen to sweep this under the rug. Nobody at the school board has investigated it. I trust that Alberto Carballo doesn't even know about it, nor does Marta Perez, nor does anybody from the school board know about this, because I guarantee you that there would have been an investigation. And one of the lieutenants from the school board testified under oath that he was quote-unquote aware of it, and nothing had been done about it. So, you have a state attorney's office that's cleaning this up for this officer, going after...
And again, when you say an office, you're saying just those... These prosecutors, these specific prosecutors,
correct,
are, and again, I don't know this prosecutor, and I haven't had a chance to speak to him. And I can tell you, as a former prosecutor, there are some prosecutors who, obviously, like everything else, there's good and bad in every profession. There are some prosecutors who are bad. Okay, rare. Like I'm telling you, I don't. Less than a handful of prosecutors I've known in my life that I would argue are unethical. Okay, and should not be prosecutors. The majority of them fall into another area, which is less nefarious, that they just believe officers. They haven't been burned yet to know that there are cops are human like everybody else, that lie. Some of them secretly want to be in that, be one of the boys or one of the girls and be in part of it. And so they want to be in on it and they want to really fight for these officers. Right. But again, it's not in a nefarious situation. But I think that this is what's going on here. I think they don't realize that these cops, even without doing, again, without planting evidence, they're still trying to cover for this guy. Probably because he's older, probably because he's about to collect his pension. And if he got arrested for something like a felony and he lost his pension, they'd feel really bad for him. Well, and that's probably why they're covering up for him. But I don't know.
And I'll tell you the flip side to that: he could lose his job for the fact that his grandson got a hold of his firearm and discharged it, which is probably another reason why they're trying to clean up this mess for him.
Correct.
So that's another factor. And I'll tell you something interesting. The advent of body cams. There was a big debate about that several years ago, mandating departments to have body cams. The body cam on this one shows a female Miami-Dade police officer, Metro-Dade police officer, coming in and saying, my buddy, to the old man.
To the old man.
So it's there's clearly evidence of cleaning this thing up, of potential public corruption, and notwithstanding that, and I we'll call them the pit state's attorneys in the office. Okay.
Which are the lower level state attorneys, the ones that are the entry level. I don't want to say lower level, entry level.
I just call them your standard, your line prosecutor.
Yeah, but I mean, so people who aren't prosecutor or not in the profession understand. Yeah. They're more of like the entry level felony prosecutors.
Correct. And so they have all this evidence. They have the video. They've seen the video. And they have all these statements. They've been present for all these statements. They've heard all the testimony. They have sworn testimony of a minor in possession of a firearm, of forcible felonies. I mean, I'm talking about ripping off a round. That carries a 10-year min-man.
Why don't we play the audio so you could hear it? Now, if you speak Spanish, you're going to be able to hear what a woman, and I believe that woman is the mother of the child, right?
The grandmother and the mother. You can hear both of them.
Okay. And they are talking. You'll see in the video. But we're not going to show it to you. But you can see in the video that the person that the women are speaking to is the minor child who already has his grandfather's firearm in his hand. And then you're going to hear a shot right after the audio starts. Go ahead. All right, so you can hear the gunshot almost immediately. You hear everybody screaming and yelling, and then you hear one of the women say something about a grandfather.
That's the grandmother, who has given. I'll tell you this: she's given very favorable testimony as to why these charges have no bases. And
you mean favorable to your client?
Favorable to my client.
So the off-duty officer's wife has actually testified favorable to your client in the deposition.
Correct. Okay. Favorable to my client. And what she's telling the grandson is your grandfather's going to lose his job because, number one, as a sworn law enforcement officer at any level, even at the most, minimal level, which are these statutorily created departments like UM, school board, you're not supposed to let your minor child get a hold of your gun.
You can't, right?
I mean, that's you're giving
that's child endangerment.
It's endangerment, and you're given a firearm that's issued by the taxpayers of the county of whatever you live, and you're supposed to protect that and
you're supposed to secure that firearm.
Correct, and much more. I'll put it this way: much more. This is a school board officer. These are the officers that work with your kid. Okay, so if you're listening, this is serious stuff. I mean, this is an officer who is day in, day out working with kids, allowing a kid to get a hold of his firearm, and yet the state attorney's office isn't looking into this. They're just saying,
well, again, when you say the state attorney, I don't think Kathy knows this.
I'm not talking about Kathy.
Kathy doesn't know this, but this is why you're doing this, because you need to bring attention to this, because I think,
we do.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you've hit a wall. You've hit a wall with the line prosecutors, and now you need to bring attention to this so people can see what's going on.
And I think it's important. It's I will call it an issue of great public importance, which is you've got serious misfeasance and malfeasance, and nobody is looking into this, and it's scary because it's scary because this is a school board resource officer, no less, and he's allowing a minor to get a hold of his gun. The state attorney's office knows about it. and yet we're still sitting here trying to explain away why you've overcharged this. And your intent and your purpose for overcharging this is to get a plea out of it so you can clean up for the old man.
Correct. Here's, with about 5 minutes left, here's why to me this is important. We've heard over the last couple of years, really in the last 3 or 4 years, a lot has been made by certain people about nobody being above the law. And they're absolutely correct. But here's a situation where it actually applies, where somebody thinks they're above the law. This officer, regardless of what your client did, now I don't know what, I haven't looked into the case enough to know whether they have a good faith basis to prosecute your client for battery. Because in certain situations, especially confrontations like this, it's very, not just is it volatile, but it shifts. And you could be the victim right now, and 2 seconds later, you're the aggressor, right? So if you and I get into a fist fight and you start attacking me, but then I somehow get you to leave me alone and you start running away and I now chase you, now I've become the aggressor. And both of us actually might be able to be prosecuted for a battery. You on me and then me later when I chased you. So, but I can say this, there's no getting around this man showing up with a firearm, pointing it at people, because even if he was a cop in uniform, he wouldn't be able to just pull his gun out and start pointing it, especially when there's a lot of kids. And secondly, he definitely committed a crime when he allowed his son, or his grandson rather, to have access to that firearm. He didn't secure the firearm. Those are two crimes that are independent of anything else that happened that day.
I agree.
And that guy's not being prosecuted.
Neither is his grandson.
And secondly, how could they prosecute your client? Now, maybe a battery, but on a law enforcement officer, it's not enough for him to say, I'm a cop. It's not. And the minute people start fearing that we cannot defend ourselves, they're going to be taking away one of our rights, one of our inalienable rights. I have a right to defend myself. You have a right to defend yourself. You guys have a right to defend yourself. And if a guy shows up and he doesn't bring the right identification to show he's a cop, why are you supposed to believe you're a cop? There's a lot of people out there that go around saying they're cops to try and rip you off.
I agree.
So I certainly don't understand how they prosecuted him for that.
This is a serious issue of great public importance. Like I said, not everybody's a cop always. You might be a cop when you're in uniform and working, but you're not a cop always. And I'll tell you one other thing. I agree with you that in fights and so forth, there's shifting dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no excuse why two guns are present and nobody's looked into this.
I agree.
It's disgusting. I think I don't look, and I don't want to put blame on anybody that's elected or appointed, because I don't think Alberto Carvalho, I don't think the school board members, I don't think Kathy.
Correct. I don't think anybody.
But I hope.
But maybe now they will.
I hope this brings attention to that, because somebody in the department, in the hierarchy of their departments and their agencies, have definitely dropped the ball, allowing this case to go unchecked.
Yeah, this isn't right. This isn't fair. Maybe your client might be guilty of a battery. I don't know if he's guilty of child endangerment with allowing these kids to fight, how long these kids were fighting, what his problem was when he got there, how quickly he was there. I don't know any of that. And that's certainly something that the state might be able to prove. But law enforcement officer, not the way this guy was dressed. And not charging this old man for half of the stuff he did. Again, he may not have been wearing a badge, but he certainly escalated everything.
He did. He brought two guns, and that's where the whole video, that's where the whole segment of videos, you can tell everybody's screaming, everybody's scared. And as somebody, look, Ed, I'll tell you candidly, and you know this personally about me, I am a diehard Second Amendment guy. I'm a card-carrying lifetime member of the NRA, okay? Right. And I say that proudly. And to me, this is offensive because you have a child with a gun shooting it in the presence of other children that were present. And yet nobody's taking this seriously.
This is the kind of stuff that could have potentially become a tragedy and made it all worse for the rest of us. We're going to keep you updated on this. We're going to let you know what's happening. At some point, maybe we may even be able to get the video if we can mask the minors so you can see the whole video. But hopefully this is going to be resolved, and we'll let you know. We'll let you all know what's going on with this. Thank you again for a special edition of the Ed Martinez Show featuring Madam X, although she's not here today. She's here in spirit. She had to take a break after last night.
I had to give her a discount code, you know?
We will see you guys on Wednesday on the Ed Martinez Show featuring Madam X at 6. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Very good, Jose. And by the way, I want to compliment